So here we are, back in the third of the three presentations for FDT4, Diversity and Inclusion, task number 2, the formal comparative research paper. Again, I'm Carl Swenson, and along with Janae Reiser, we are the course mentors for FDT4, Diversity and Inclusion. Obviously, we're here to help you. We're here to make your time in FDT4 more beneficial and more efficient. So let us help you when we can. Up till now, we've talked about a lot to do with this task, and now what we want to do is we want to move towards completion. And toward that end, we need to talk about 4 more sections, the last 4 sections, that are involved in this. Section E is the results section. This is where we're actually going to talk about what we've studied and what we've researched. Section F is referred to as the conclusion section. We'll talk about the 3 individual and distinct parts that make up Section F. Then we'll talk about Section G, which is our reference section. Now, this is a little bit different. Normally we put the references at the very end of the paper, but here in this paper we're putting them ahead of Section H, which is the methods section, and we'll talk about the 4 parts that are involved with it. So moving into Section E, these are the directions straight from task stream. This is the way that they are worded. And it suggests in task stream that you write a section, a results section, describing each of your cultures. Now, if you remember, and I'm sure you've done this already, we developed concept maps or outlines based on the 3 themes common to both cultures and the areas of interest that we were going to talk about. And those are the things we looked at in the research. So now it's time to speak to those things in this paper. We're going to present the information you found in narrative form, and you're going to present it. What I would suggest that you do is you present first your culture A, your first culture, in its entirety. Talk about all 3 themes, talk about all of the areas of interest within those themes. Completely tell the story about the first culture. And then when you're done with that first story, start over again with the second culture. This is a lot more readable, I think, than if you actually compare one versus the other as you're going through. So if I were you, I'd tell the entire story of one culture and then come back, start again, and tell the entire story of the second culture. The recommendation in task stream is that you have at least 1 to 2 pages per theme for each culture. That's going to put this section somewhere between 6 and 12 pages in length. So that gives you some idea of the amount of writing that you might need to do here. This section has to all be fact. This has to all be factual information that you find. We don't really want to see any opinion in this portion of your paper. And the way that we're going to ensure that it's all fact is that we're going to document it. And the way that we document it is through the use of in-text citations. So every time that you put an idea that you found in somebody else's work, then you really need to cite that person's work and give that person credit for the work by providing an in-text citation. That means that there's going to be a high number of in-text citations in this section, and that is important. Remember this, as the reader is reading your paper, the reader has 3 options in deciding what to think about the information. The reader can assume that it's fact because you've provided an in-text citation showing where you found the information. The reader can assume that it's fact because it's common knowledge. Or the reader can assume that it's opinion, your opinion, because it's not common knowledge and it's not cited. And when we're talking about common knowledge, it has to be knowledge that's common to everybody, not just common to those people in a particular field of study. For instance, if I were writing a paper about U.S. history and specifically about Abraham Lincoln, I could say that Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States, and his picture, his portrait is featured on a $5 bill. And we could assume that those things are pretty much common knowledge. Everybody pretty much knows that Abraham Lincoln was indeed the 16th president of the United States. And if you're lucky enough to have a $5 bill, and then you probably are aware that his picture, his portrait, is represented on that $5 bill. If I were to say in my next sentence that Abraham Lincoln had three sons named Mo, Larry, and Curly, that's not necessarily common knowledge, so I'd better be citing that, or the reader would probably have to assume that that's my opinion, and rightfully so. So if there is no citation and it is not common knowledge, then the reader must believe that it's your opinion. And in section E, we really don't want any opinions. We have to have fact. So that's very, very important. Make sure that you're up on the APA methods of in-text citation so that you don't have a problem with that. Once we've completed writing section E, both parts of it, culture A and culture B, then we'll move on to section F. And again, from the task stream directions, this is the verbiage that's used. In this section F, we're actually seeing three parts here. The first part is a discussion of how these two cultures have similarities. We want to look at least two similarities. And you notice it says using the information you researched. So within these common themes, we're going to find some similarities, and it's in those similarities that we want to report. The second part is to discuss differences that we find within these three themes and within these two cultures. And we want to look at least three differences. Now, these differences could be very stark differences, or they could be very subtle differences. The fact is that the rationale that you use to determine the differences is what's going to make or break you for this paper. So make sure that as you talk about similarities and differences that you provide sufficient information that for the reader to fully understand what it is that the point that you're trying to get across here. The third part of this is that you provide at least three specific teaching applications based on the information that you've learned in this research project. Now, remember that teaching application does not have to be a lesson plan. Teaching applications are things about these cultures that you've learned that can be beneficial in helping you teach the class. However, they must be specific to these two cultures. Now, I know, believe me, I know when you become a teacher, you're not going to discount any of the other diversity in the classroom. I know that. You're going to pay attention to all of the diverse students in your classroom. But for the purposes of this paper, I want you to look specifically at the two cultures that you've researched and how that information plays into your teaching applications. So make sure that they're not too general. Make sure that they're specific to those two cultures. You can bring, it says down here, everything must be related to what you put in your concept map and what you researched in the results section. That's true. You don't want to bring any new information in at this point because you've not got any basis for bringing that new information. For instance, if your three common themes were family structure, food, and traditions, and then in this section, in the differences or similarities section, you begin to talk about language. That would be a no-no because you're bringing in brand new information. However, if you find that there are some significant differences in family structure or in traditions or in foods, then this is the place to bring it out. Now, even though you may have cited it before in section E, I want you to go ahead and use your in-text citations here again. If for no other reason than to, again, credit the authors, the original providers of this information, because it was initially their work, and we're simply using that work. So make sure that you have in-text citations for both similarities and differences. Obviously, because your teaching applications are your ideas, you need not have in-text citations for those. Moving on to section G, which is our reference page. This is might seem to be a very simple thing. What we're doing here is we're creating a reference list. You can call it works cited, you can call it the bibliography page, you can call it the reference page, you can call it whatever you want, as long as it's done in APA format. Now, there are many places to go to bone up on APA format. One of the very best that I've ever found is the online writing lab at Purdue University. If you Google OWL Purdue, O-W-L, Purdue, P-U-R-D-U-E, it'll take you directly to the website for the online writing lab. And what they've done is they've taken a very complex and comprehensively written book called the Publication Manual for the American Psychological Association. They've taken that very complex book and they've put it in terms that we understand better. And so they also have a great number of examples of how APA style should look. So I would strongly recommend that you look at that. Make sure if you have an in-text citation that you have a matching reference on your reference page. And vice versa, if you have a reference on your reference page, make sure you have a matching in-text citation for that. These are some of the APA rules that will be specifically looked at. We want you to use a hanging indent. This is a convention that's not unique to APA, but it's one of only a few places where it's used. The first line of your reference will run from margin to margin. The second and subsequent lines will be indented. We want you to look at capitalization rules. This is a little unusual. The only words that we capitalize in titles and subtitles are the first words of the title and the subtitle, and then any proper nouns. So it's going to be different than the title of a book, where most words are capitalized. We only use first and middle initials of the author's names. This is a gender bias protection. We use no titles, no degrees. We don't call people by PhD or MD or anything else on the reference page. And everything is alphabetized by author's last name. This little URL down at the bottom is about an 8-minute video that shows you exactly how to excuse me, how to make that hanging indent work, and it also expands a little bit on each of these APA rules. So, Section H is the last section that we write about. And in Section H, we're going to write about four specific subjects, but these are just really need to be a good, robust paragraph for each one. Section H1, we want to know the pathway that you took to do your research. So, for instance, if you went to a brick and mortar library, did you talk to a librarian? What did the librarian tell you? Did the librarian direct you to particular stacks of books, or to a card catalog, or to particular magazines or journals in searching for information? If you went to the internet, please tell us what search engine you used, and tell us what some of the keywords and phrases were that got your research journey started. For Section H2, we'd like you to choose the two most important sources that you found, and then give us a couple of sentences as to why they were important. For instance, in my work with the Ukrainian mountain climbers, I might want to talk about a National Geographic article that was very, very helpful because not only did it describe in words some of the family values and the family structure and the working conditions, but also there were some beautiful pictures that made it much clearer as to how the Ukrainian mountain climbers actually lived and worked. So something similar or something like that. In section H3, we would like you in a short paragraph to explain to us how you organize yourself for writing. So you've gone out and you've done all of this research and you found all of this good information and you say, wow, this is really a cool paragraph. I need to put this in my paper. Or, ooh, look at this. This is really makes my point. I need to get this in my paper. How do you get from that point to the paper? Do you use post-it notes? Do you use highlighters? Do you use cut and paste? Do you write things down an old school way in a notebook and then work from an outline or a concept map? How do you organize your thoughts and your materials in order to synthesize them or put them together in a written form into a finalized paper? How do you go about that process? And then the very last section of this paper, section H4, is a paragraph as to why this research is important to you. And I want you to look at it from 2 points of view. First of all, I want you to look at it from a professional point of view. Why is it important to you as a teacher to have done this work? And secondly, why is it important to you as a person to have done this work? And in order to talk about the personal aspect, you really need to get yourself out of the classroom. You need to divorce yourself from the classroom completely. Take a look at it from the point of view of family, of neighborhood, community, social organizations, community organizations, church group, whatever it is that makes an impact on your personal life. How is this important as it relates to that? Once you've completed these, then you're just about ready to put this Hummer to bed. Now, I want you to make sure that you proofread this paper because you've written a lot, you've spent a lot of time with it, and your mind sees it in one way that your eyes may not. So make sure that you spend some time going through this paper and proofreading it, checking for misspelled words, checking for grammar, and so on and so forth. And as you're writing this paper, it's really a great idea to have that rubric open so that you can see exactly what those evaluators are going to be looking for and how they want to, what they would like to see in this paper. I want you to submit sections C through H. Remember that C was our outlines or concept maps, D was our introduction, E is the results section, F is the conclusion section, G was references, and H is the methods. I want you to combine all of that into one document and submit it to Task Stream, and we'll let them do their magic with it. So, if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you want to talk about this project, make sure that you get in touch with either Janae or me, and we'll be more than happy to work with you on it. Good luck with this. I know you can do it. Take care. Talk with you later.